Welcome back to Airsoft Boneyard and FPS. Today we're going to continue the TAC 41 project. In the last video, we looked at the effect of 3 different springs at 3 different hop-up settings on the FPS and energy output of 2 different weight BBs, 0.2 gram and 0.45 gram. For that testing, we left everything about the rifle stock. We only changed the springs. We used a 75 Newton spring from Silverback. This is the stock spring. A 2.8 Joule spring from Rapax. And a 150 Newton Silverback spring, which is one of the strongest ones I could find. Today we're going to put the Silverback Advanced Piston Head on top of the stock piston. Right now we do not have an air brake on it. It does come with 3 different air brakes, a short, medium, and a long. We're going to first repeat all the testing we did in the last video with the 3 different springs at the 3 different hop-up settings for each BB weight, using just the Silverback head without an air brake on it. Then we'll do some more testing with each air brake, but we're just going to leave 1 hop-up setting. So we'll set it right in the middle, right at 5, and we'll test all 3 springs, both BB weights, with each of the different air brakes to give you an idea of how quiet they make the replica, and also how much FPS loss or energy loss you're going to get for running each of those. Here's a reminder of what we're looking for, or at least what I'm looking for, out of this testing. So my tuning targets for the TAC 41, I want my energy at the muzzle to be 2.8 joules or less, though targeting very close to 2.8 joules, with 0.45 gram BBs, which means I do not want a joule creep past that. My muzzle velocity per my Fields rule has to be 550 feet per second or less with 0.2 gram BBs, though due to the joule creep of the TAC 41, I suspect it's going to be pretty easy to be under the 550. Sound-wise, I would like less than 90 decibels. Ideally, I want to be closer to 80. We're slowly getting closer, and you'll see some of that in this video, but we've got a long way to go to try to get this low, and I don't know that we will. Standard deviation on my feet per second, I would like that to be less than 1 foot per second. And I want to do all of this while using the lightest spring possible to keep the pull force as low as possible, so it's easy to use the replica all day. Alright, let's get into the data. Looking at the muzzle velocity without an air brake for the Silverback Advanced Piston Head, we see that higher hop-up is going to give us more feet per second. This is what we expected to see, but in the last video we didn't quite see that with the stock piston. However, we do have very high standard deviations, so this is not very good. With the 0.45 gram BBs, feet per second does drop a lot as expected, and it does suppress the effect of the hop up. They're more or less all even. However, the heavier BBs do suppress our standard deviations quite a bit. The 2.8 joule right in the middle, we do get pretty good results with a 0.8 standard deviation. When we convert those muzzle velocities to energy, we see something kind of interesting. We showed in the last video that TAC 41 will joule creep pretty badly. It actually gets much worse with the Advanced Piston Head with no air brake. You can see that, especially for this 150 Newton spring, we have a jump of almost 1.5 joules for some of these settings. That's a crazy amount of joule creep. We would be way up over where I want to be at 2.8 joules with the 150 Newton spring. And even though our energy seemed really low and our feet per second seemed really low with the 2.8 joule spring, it's actually we're pretty close to where we want to be energy-wise with the heavier BBs. Now, the downside, I'm not running an air brake. We're quite loud. We want to be less than 90 decibels. We're pretty close to 100 or high 90s for the most part. Increasing that hop up will quiet down the replica a little bit, but it's not a ton. So we might need to add in the air brakes, and that's what we're going to look at next. So looking at the effect of the air brakes, we have our long air brake in yellow, medium in gray, short in orange, and then the no brake setting we just looked at in blue. Here we're keeping the hop up all set constant. And we get more or less what we would expect as our result for the 150 Newton spring. The longer the air brake, the less energy we have. Basically, we're going to trade muzzle energy or muzzle velocity for a quieter replica. The interesting result here is that the no air brake one for the 75 Newton and 2.8 joule spring, it's actually less feet per second than the short air brake. That's kind of odd. Not really sure why that happened, but both those springs showed that result. One of the benefits of adding these air brakes is we really do calm down the standard deviations. You can see they're much more consistent than they were without the air brake. And when we look at the heavier BBs, standard deviations are staying pretty low. For the most part, under 3. We want to be under 1, but for pretty limited upgrades at this point, it's not bad. And keep in mind, still fully stock everywhere else on the TAC 41. No Teflon tape mods or anything like that to help with air seal. Looking at the feet per second results, once again, we are going to lose quite a bit of muzzle velocity by adding these air brakes. But when we convert that to energy, it actually kind of plays out in our favor for some of these. So the 0.45 gram BBs, 150 Newton spring, we can run a small air brake and end up right at that 2.8 joule limit. The Rapac's 2.8 joule, we can run a small air brake and still be pretty close. And the benefit of those air brakes is that we are going to quiet down the replica a little bit. In this case, it's not as much as I was hoping. Still going to probably need to mix the air brakes with some other upgrades to really get this replica quieted down and get it under that 90 decibels. But this is not a bad start. And to show the effect of these air brakes, we can look at the 0.2 gram BBs, 106, 107 decibels with no air brake. With the air brakes, you can drop that 10 decibels, which, keep in mind, that means the perceived volume would be cut in half. That's a pretty significant change in what you would hear running this replica. It's not quite as significant with the heavier BBs because the heavier BBs are already a little bit quieter, as we showed in the previous video. Next video, we're going to look at the effect of the Scorpion piston with the Rapac's 2 joule spring.